Greetings, everyone. It is a beautiful morning here in Southeast Georgia. A little warm, but the way the clouds are looking this early time of day, just kind of the pinks and the whites all scattered about, it just looks real nice as the sun's coming up behind us. Pretty good weekend. Got the oil change for my truck finally. I had to delay it for a week just because, just busy, but got that done. Yeah, so let's get into the news.
Talks with Darren Julian, Executive Director of Julian's Auctions, about what Whitney Houston fans will see on the auction block. We'll have that coming up in about 15 minutes right here on Morning Edition, 7:06 on Monday, August 11th.
GPB is proud to present the Walk Main Stage. Experience an unforgettable night of walk stories on Thursday, December 4th. Join host John Good live at Center Stage Theater.
Raydio Hour is always such an interesting program. I really don't get to hear it too much. It's mostly on, I want to say sometimes I hear it on the weekends when they play it, and then sometimes just if I am driving later at night, it's very rare for me. But the stories are always very interesting.
Henry Martinez in Los Angeles, California. President Trump will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday to discuss how to end the war in Ukraine. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, to talk about the administration's expectations for this meeting. But first, let's set the stage. Trump announced last Friday that they were very close to reaching a deal, but it doesn't look like he's demanded anything of Vladimir Putin yet, and the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, has not yet been invited. NPR White House correspondent Franco Ordonez is following all the developments.
He's making a deal with himself by himself.
We don't have a ton of details, but Trump and his team say it's going to involve concessions on both sides, particularly the swapping of territories and some kind of ceasefire to work all this stuff out. Here's Trump talking about it on Friday.
It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both.
Now, it's pretty hard to see a deal being worked out, though, without Ukraine's input. And President Zelensky, as you know, has not been invited to Friday's meeting in Alaska, at least not yet. Vice President Vance said on Fox News that he did not think it was a good idea for Putin and Zelensky to meet before Trump had a chance to meet with Putin, but that could come later.
Yeah, Trump may say, though, Franco, they're closer to deals. Zelensky already throws some cold water on what's been proposed. So is there a deal?
Yeah, I mean, that is another thing, and it's a really big thing. I mean, this idea
there might be a plan for a deal.
Is very controversial. Russia has long demanded that Ukraine cede regions in the east currently occupied by Russia, as well as Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. But the Ukrainian constitution doesn't allow this. Zelensky would basically need permission from parliament or some kind of national referendum. And over the weekend, Zelensky said that would not happen, that it was a non-starter, and that he would not hand over territory to an occupier.
Okay, which begs the question, how does Trump plan to get that resolved?
Yeah, he was actually pressed about this on Friday, about the Ukrainian constitution. Trump said he told Zelensky to do what he needs to do to make it happen.
Well,
he's treating him like a vassal state.
He's not authorized to do certain things. I said, well, we're going to have to get it fast because we're getting very close to a deal.
So, no small thing, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, no small thing, but it sounds like a big cap. I mean, so who's the winner of this?
Russia.
At this point, it's Putin, and most analysts agree. And just the fact that there could be a meeting is a win for Putin, who will now visit the U.S. despite failing to agree to any of Trump's demands, including a ceasefire. And this would be the first face-to-face meeting Putin has had with a sitting U.S. president since he met then-President Joe Biden in 2021.
Yeah, Trump and Putin's relationship is kind of complicated.
It's so complicated. I mean, just days before announcing the summit, Trump was complaining about Putin's continued bombing of Ukraine and threatening new sanctions. And this is all, before, for months, he seemed to almost defer to President Putin, not wanting to threaten the deal. It really runs hot and cold. Now, again, it appears that Russia have not agreed to any concessions in order to get this meeting, but it is also clear that Trump has such faith in his negotiating skills that he thinks he can make a difference just meeting face-to-face.
We will all see. That's NPR White House correspondent.
Got it. Yeah, no, I mean, this is just a repeat of what we saw in the past couple of months, which was the Trump administration says they're going to impose some economic punishment to Russia and its allies or provide more weapon support to Ukraine. Russia says, or the Russian delegation says, hey, let's negotiate again. And then those threats of economic or military assets being taken from or given to allies or foes respectively gets rescinded entirely and forgotten about, and then the negotiations fall apart. And all the while, Zelensky and his government is embarrassed by the American State Department. So this is just going to be a repeat of what has already happened, and it's just going to hurt the Ukrainians, the people who got invaded and are fighting for their own homeland, with their lives, and it's going to benefit the Russians.
Between himself and Russia, and between himself and Ukraine, together with all European NATO allies, and those successes include
should be the NATO
prisoners,
ambassador,
POWs, the exchange of the bodies of the fallen, and so there have been some small successes, and I think this is just going to continue to build on that because President Trump, if given a chance to end the killing and the slaughter that we're seeing on a daily basis, he's going to take that chance.
But what indication has Putin given, or Russia given, that they're actually willing to go to a peace deal? Because we speak to many experts on the show who all see Putin as in a place where they think they have momentum and they think they can get what they want.
Well, certainly, if they think they can win it on the battlefield without having to enter into diplomacy or a dialogue and move towards a ceasefire and ultimately a lasting peace, then they will just continue to prosecute the war. President Trump obviously has created the leverage to get Vladimir Putin to the table. That included the sale of U.S. weapons to our Canadian and European NATO allies, which he made sure that was supervised by people like including myself and the Secretary General of NATO. And that is moving. Those armaments, the first tranches were announced last week. Those armaments have been moving.
The leverage doesn't matter if you immediately get rid of any leverage during negotiations, which is what they've done in the past. So let's see if they fucking change their mind this time.
Took that seriously. I think he also took the seriousness of the secondary sanctions and tariffs, which India has already been subjected to, and possibly China, Brazil, and others that buy Russian oil and gas. And so, I think this is a chance. 80% of communication is nonverbal. So I think President Trump wants to get in the room with Vladimir Putin and potentially Volodymyr Zelensky and have the conversation and see if Putin is serious about peace or if he's just going to continue to extend until he gets what he ultimately wants on the battlefield. Which, again, it might as well try.
Is the Ukrainian President Zelensky invited to participate in this meeting on Friday?
Well, that hasn't been determined, and I think details are still being discussed. But whatever happens, the president's efforts to stop the killing, reach a ceasefire, and achieve an enduring peace, I think is the most important priority. And I think ultimately that will be announced from one of the nation's capitals, whether it's Kyiv or Washington, on whether or not he's going to attend. But today's Monday, and the meeting doesn't happen until Friday, so there's a lot of details I'm sure still going to be worked out.
So there is a possibility that Zelensky will participate?
Yeah, there's a possibility. I don't think that decision's been completely made yet.
Was he not invited as of yet because Putin made that a condition of the summit?
I have nothing to add to that. what I've already said.
Okay.
But ultimately, both sides are going to have to agree to a ceasefire and ultimately a peace deal. And so Zelensky's going to have to be represented either by himself or through intermediaries to negotiate this. But ultimately,
On Friday, or generally.
Yeah, generally. But again, people can call on the phone. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to add people to a meeting. I think this the whole purpose of
Invite him to the Zoom call.
has been that President Trump wants to see.
I mean, he's right in different ways,
size
but
up his sincerity.
I don't think Zelensky's going to be part of it at all.
Bringing this war to an end.
The president, if the meeting ends up being between the president of the United States and between the president of Russia, I mean, can something be accomplished without Ukraine there?
Well, ultimately, nothing's going to be agreed to until Ukraine agrees to it as well.
Yes,
a ceasefire
obviously.
Is going to require both sides to quit the fighting and quit shooting and stop the slaughter that's happening on the battlefield and quite frankly within the major cities in Ukraine as well because of the drones and missiles being set almost on a nightly basis from Russia. And so, but both sides are going to have to agree on the terms of any deal. But at the same time, President Trump, who is a experienced negotiator, he's averaging about a peace deal a month right now, and has been involved in bringing it to a conclusion just saw last week between Armenia and Azerbaijan get signed, and both of those leaders agreed that it would not have happened if President Trump hadn't gotten involved. And so I think President Trump has a chance here. He's going to take it, but at the same time, both Putin and Zelensky are going to have to agree to whatever the deal is to actually end this war.
Now, President Trump suggested, as we heard a little bit earlier, some quote swapping of territories to bring about an end to the war. Ukrainian President Zelensky says Ukraine will not quote give their land to an occupier or reward Russia for what is perpetrated. Why does President Trump think there's room to negotiate on territory that Russia has annexed or occupies?
Well, ultimately, there is just the reality of what's happening on the ground, and that is that Russia occupies a little less than 20% of Ukraine and has taken that through force. And if to have a ceasefire and to end the shooting, there's going to have to be some deal on the status of that. And ultimately, that will, if there can be a deal on the status of that 20% that Ukraine and Russia can agree to, then obviously then you take the next step. This is a very complicated situation, and both sides are going to have to move. And the good news is that the experts on both sides, the details are being worked out by the Russians and the Ukrainians as we speak.
U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker, thank you for your time, and we'll have you back as this process continues.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of coverage leading up to this, and then hopefully there's some live coverage when Trump and Putin's dinner date in Alaska, goes on. Maybe they'll go whale watching or something together, have a nice romantic evening as they plot to tear apart this third country, which one has invaded and the other has used as essentially a pawn for the last decades to agitate the invader. So, just oh man.
New CDC data shows childhood vaccination rates in Georgia are slipping. Last year, nearly
Terrifying.
87% of children entering kindergarten were up to date on required vaccines, down from more than 94% a decade ago. The state's exemption rate rose to almost 5%, mostly for religious reasons. Georgia has one of the highest vaccine exemption rates in the South. Public health experts warn the decline leaves children more vulnerable to outbreaks like measles, which Georgia has already seen this year.
Yeah, a disease that was
Coming up
declared
on Morning Edition is really
eradicated in our state. Measles was eradicated in the United States when I was a toddler, and now it's back. Absolutely crazy. Because people aren't getting vaccines. Things that are older than the parents who are refusing to save their kids' lives from preventable diseases.
The video games we've loved and lost, from our first console to the hours spent at the arcade, or the time it took to get frighteningly good at Mario Kart. Comedian and writer Mike Drucker's memoir, Good Game, No Rematch, looks back at his life in video games. You'll listen back to our conversation with him next time on 1A.
Interesting. So, I mean, they're just doing like a lab break, and we're going to cut it here in about a couple minutes. But I don't know, it's just absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, we are a civilized nation. We are at the forefront of medical discoveries and health, and somehow we are one of the most unhealthy nations in the industrialized world, in a society that has moved to like full service economy, consumer economy. We're not, to use a more rude term, a backwater country, with limited field hospitals. No, we're a country where we have, even in our smallest towns, highly reputable clinics, hospitals that can give, world-class health, world-class healthcare. That's what I'm looking for. But at the same time, it's so obscenely expensive and hard to obtain if you don't have the right job, right? Or you just don't have enough money on your own to just, pay out of pocket. And we have such a skepticism of healthcare in our country. One, because of how expensive it is and how much people get nickel and dime for it, and then just a general distrust for scientific authority. There's such mistrust in this nation, and it's going to cost the lives of so many kids as they don't get vaccinated. As I said, these vaccines have existed longer than the parents have been alive. These parents probably got vaccinated, and they didn't die of a preventable disease when they were a kid. So it's just absolutely ridiculous to me. But we will leave it there for the day. We'll see how this Russia stuff goes. Russia-Ukraine, really just Russia-American negotiations over a third country that they've both been trying to plunder for decades. So, yeah. But y'all have a great week. Enjoy your Monday. We'll see how mine goes.